بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وروح العالمين له الفداء رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So dear brothers and sisters, what we're doing is we are studying the Quran subject-wise. We're talking about this whole idea of prophethood, and the idea is to get a picture or an understanding of big picture Islam. Big picture Islam. In particular, we were looking for some answers. What we find in the verses of the Quran is that every prophet was opposed by his people. And this might sound interesting. If we say that Islam is the religion of the fitrah, and it's here to liberate mankind, give them everything that they need in this world and the hereafter, why is it that every single people oppose their prophets? Right? Islam is all the same. Why everybody? What happens when we study the verses of the Quran is that we learn that when the people ended up opposing those prophets, it wasn't the same. As in, it wasn't that everybody would oppose the prophets at the same level. What we find is that there was a certain group or groups who would oppose the prophets first. They would be the first lines of defense when it came to the old way and making sure that people didn't accept the truth. Send us salawat, please. Well, we covered three of these groups last time. So the three groups that we covered in the past were, one of them were the tyrannical ruler. Obviously, the tyrannical ruler. The secondly were the political elite, those who would serve that tyrannical ruler. And then the third group were those who were fabulously wealthy by using that oppressive system, illegitimate means to gain their wealth, but wealth that you and I can't even imagine. So those are the three groups. We haven't covered the verses yet. Today, inshallah, the talk will be a little bit ayat heavy, as in we're going to cover the verses. And brothers and sisters, remember that normally I mention the verses, then we examine the verses together. If we can get this, if we can learn these lessons from history and then share them, other people who are in the struggle of the prophets, which is the way of Imam Mahdi, they'll know what's coming for them. For instance, the Quran also tells us at times the prophets were outwardly victorious. Just as a question, what were the characteristics that the believers had at the times when prophets would outwardly be successful? The Quran gives us guidance on that. But today, what we want to cover is the fourth group that would oppose the prophets, and then after that, look at the verses. So, the fourth group that would oppose the teachings of the prophets were the religious authorities. The scholars, the monks, the rabbis, those people who were profiting with the old system. These individuals will be the people who oppose the prophets and would fight them tooth and nail. There's a little reminder from all of us, or for all of us. What happens if a religious authority, or even sometimes religious people who are respected on behalf of the deen, if they get close to a tyrant? What happens to society? What do they do? What is the presence of a scholar or priest, somebody who's respected? What does that do for the tyrant? Imam Sajjad, Salamullahi alayhi, explains in this one letter to a man named Muhammad bin Muslim az-Zuhri. This is a little bit off topic, but just so that we know, we're warning or we're aware of what happens. He says this, وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ أَدْنَى مَا كَتَمْتَ وَأَخَفَّ مَا احْتَمَلْتَ. He says, know this, that the least of what you've done, the lightest burden that you have, he says this, أَنْ آنَسْتَ وَحْشَةَ الظَّالِمِ. You provided comfort, and you calmed the fear of the oppressor, the zalim. He says, وَسَحَلْتَ لَهُ طَرِيقَ الْغَيْبِ. you made it easy for him to misguide. He says, when you answered his call, when he invited you to the palace, you came and you showed up, then he says that the least that you did was that you made it easy for him to oppress others. You calmed those fears and that worry that he would have. Now, so one of the groups were the religious leadership. And these people, throughout the course of history, we see patterns. That's what we're learning from the Quran. Patterns that we're going to expect going forward. And things for all of us as believers to know. Not just something that the religious leadership should know. All of the mu'mineen and mu'minat should know what's going to happen, what's waiting for us. If we're following the path of the Anbiya, if we're calling towards God, what happens next? So, we learn this. If you look at the story of Nabi Ibrahim. Nabi Ibrahim, the first group that came against Nabi Ibrahim were the priests, the high priests. Those were the individuals who went and told Nimrud to throw Ibrahim in the fire. Ibrahim comes over, he starts questioning the gods and the ways of the temple. Those guys are the guys up in arms, screaming and shouting, protect your gods. It was those same priests, right? The priests, the regular people didn't know what went on in the temple. Where the interest of those religious authorities lie, right? They were the people. But we don't only see it for Nabi Ibrahim. Musa alayhi salam, he starts his mission. Musa is now he's going against Pharaoh of the time. He's calling the people guidance, delivering them from slavery. The first people to get upset, the first people to comfort the Pharaoh at that time, these same scholars, the religious authorities, the magicians. They're telling Pharaoh that, okay, he has magic, we have magic, right? We're calming his fears down, right? The most vocal opposition was this. We can handle this situation. Continue to do what you've got to do. They're with him. We'll move now to Isa. When Isa alayhi salam starts his mission, again, it's the scholars, the religious authorities at that time, those who were connected to the tyrants, those are the people who come over and speak. For those of us who are a little bit more familiar with the biblical studies, the stories of the Pharisees, right, opposing Jesus, right? Even in the Bible, the current Bible that we have, with all of the distortions, with all of the things that have been added and subtracted, right, we still see very clearly the people that went over and opposed Isa, the teachings of Isa, are again this group. Also in the time of our prophet. It was the scholars among the corrupt ones. Because there's some people who are pious, who accept Islam, who are just looking for the truth. We're not denying that exists. And when you look at the verses of the Quran, you'll see that the Quran doesn't condemn everybody. But a lot of those individuals are the people who would be the part of that first line of defense. So if you remember in the story of the prophet, right? There's some people always questioning the prophet. How is he? Is he really a prophet? Right? Questioning him. Let's see proof. Let's test him. Right? Who started? There's some well-known. Who are the people behind Mubahala? Mubahala, that famous event. It was the scholarship, the religious leaders who went over, started Mubahala. So we're seeing a pattern now. For every prophet, one of the groups that's out there and opposing the prophets are these religious scholars. So what happens is this. Normally, when a new way of thinking comes into mind, we're just thinking, again, big picture Islam. A new way of thinking comes into a society. There's a prophet. The prophet speaks in a way which is clear for everyone. Clear proofs, talking to the people, wonderful akhlaq, right? A liberating message. But there's some people, you would think, okay, well, the prophet's speaking to them, intellectual arguments, everybody should run over, everybody should join the prophets. It wasn't like that. There would be a group of people, these same priests, who would go over and start telling the people to remain firm on the path of your forefathers. Raising questions, doubt, right? These same things with these prophets. What happened with these individuals against the prophets? What happened is they benefited from the ignorance of the previous society. They were special in that society. They held a special class. They were the pastor, or the father, or the pope, or the rabbi, right? People held them in respect. They gave offerings sometimes to the temples or the churches. Right? There was reasons for these individuals. And actually, if we look closely, what unites those four groups is this: their interests were threatened by the new way of life. If it was somebody who was a tyrannical political leader, and you're now saying that only God should rule, God chooses, right? That means my livelihood, my way of earning, that's right. If you are somebody who is fabulously wealthy off the exploitation of other human beings, right? You hear those verses of the Quran when it talks about the natural resources being for everybody. If you are a multinational company, again, and I'm not making all the connections, for us it's pretty easy for us to make these connections. These are stories about the past, but for us, very easily it's able to see where are the connections nowadays. Right? That inner circle of the tyrant. Right? Those people who are the ministers and advisors and the kickbacks that come from being one of the cronies of the tyrant, again, those are individuals. So what unites all of these individuals are self-interest. It's a test for the people. It would take a lot of sincerity to have that much power, be benefiting off such a system, and to say, oh, there's a new system. It's all about the truth. Everybody can enjoy. Well, Bismillah. Most people aren't like that. The nafs is not like that, and they're not acceptable. These individuals, all of them, what we find is they were playing God. There's verses of the Quran where Allah describes himself. And when he describes himself, sometimes he says these words. God, about himself, he says, La yus'alu amma yaf'al. God is not questioned about that which he does. Wa hum yus'alu. The people get questioned. Right? These individuals are like that. We're over there. We're making the rules. We're deciding. Right? Not us being over there, being questioned, being held accountable. Right? Or other times when God says in the Quran, وَلَكِنْ اللَّهُ يَفْعَلُ مَا يُرِيدُ. God does whatever he pleases. Right? God does that. So these individuals, they were doing these things. They weren't being questioned. They were above the law. Right? Now you're introducing a new way of life where everybody's equal under the law. There are no special privileges. There are no social classes which are somehow entitled to a certain benefits. Right? So these individuals obviously felt threatened. Now, these people who were playing God, they felt threatened by the message of the Anbiya. Now we're going to start to see verses. And again, brothers and sisters, these are patterns, right? Patterns of what was happening in the past and many verses of the Quran. For instance, we're going to start off, and usually, brothers and sisters, I mentioned the verse, and we look at the verses together, right? So we're learning together. The story of Nabi Hud, so this is just one example, Surah 7 and verse number 66. Surah 7, verse number 66. You'll see these same words repeated for other prophets, by the way. What happens? So Hud comes over and he starts his mission. He's explaining, he's telling the people what are the right things to do. Then God says what happens in the Quran. قَالَ الْمَلَأُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. So the elite of the mala, the word mala in Arabic means to fill. Right? When they say to fill something, yamla'una, they fill something. These people, they filled other people's eyes with their pomp and grandeur. Right? This elite, this political elite, these individuals, there were people when you walk down the street, right? Nowadays, limousines and bodyguards, and right? These individuals, you'll see many times in the Quran references that the first line of opposition to the Anbiya, now is who? Is the same malak, the political elite. People like Haman, that advisor of Pharaoh. Remember in the story of Pharaoh, we have this in the Quran also in Surah 40, verse number 36. Pharaoh's speaking, and then there's some people who serve Pharaoh. They're in that inner circle. They're part of that group. The main beneficiaries, one of them is an individual named Haman. Again, brothers and sisters, we don't want to focus on that one person. We're seeing a symbol for what happens in society. There's not only one Haman, right? There's many Hamans, right? He represents, right? So these people were the strategians, cronies, advisors, Haman. So for instance, Surah 40, verse number 36, when Pharaoh is speaking, he says, وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ يَا Haman. Right? He says to Pharaoh, Haman, when he says, Ibni li sarha, build me a tower. Right? When he's over there battling against Musa, trying to fight against Musa, the person who's going to go over and carry out the instructions, build the tower is Haman. In the time of, historically now, And again, I thought it might be better for us even to first just think about the principles and see how it applies to 2018. Let's think about it ourselves. In the time of Muawiyah, example, for us it's who's the pharaoh of the time? Who's Nimrud of the time? In the time of Muawiyah, the people who were like Haman, that inner circle, not the leader himself, the political elite, the cronies, the advisors, strategians, Steve Bannon, those kind of people. Who was the advisor at that time? One of them? A man named Mughira bin Shu'bah. Mughira bin Shu'bah. If you remember in the Islamic history, you'll see in the time of Saqifa, one of those key individuals behind the scenes, making it all happen, Mughira. You also see him behind the scenes. This guy, he became a Muslim in the 5th year of the Hijrah. After the Hijrah, came to Medina. You also see him, he's the guy who told Muawiyah to make Yazid the crown prince. The same Haman. So Haman is not just some individual, Haman's, right? Or another one. Again, you have heard his name. Ziyad ibn Abi. Ziyad ibn Abi. So Ziyad ibn Abi, he's the person who, again, he was amongst the rank of the Muslims. If you remember his story, he was actually at one time one of the commanders under Ali ibn Abi Talib, one of the governors in Basra. Muawiyah got him to join his side. He has a whole story in history about how he got him to join. And this guy, once he joined Muawiyah, he became a legendary monster. His son is Ubaydullah. In Karbala, Ziyad ibn Abi, right? The person who so under Muawiyah, he was given Basra and Kufa, and then his son, Ubaydullah, was given that rulership over Basra. And then you remember the story when Karbala happens, is they say that we're going to give him the power over Kufa, and then he goes over there, right? So Ziyad ibn Abi. The point being that we have these stories, or these individuals, these people behind the scenes, the Hamans of the time. They'll also have those, we're going to cover the verses of the Quran, those who were felt fabulously wealthy, those families nowadays we can think about, what are the names of those families who are so wealthy? We can't even imagine how much wealth goes into it. How do they get countries to go to war? Anyhow, they're called the Mutrafun in the Quran, we'll cover them. And then the last group is the group that I talked about, the Quranic terminology, if you want, the corrupt religious leaders. The Quran refers to them as the Ruhban and the Ahbar. Those scholars, those rabbis, those monks, these are the individuals that the Quran tells us about. Now, we're going to start going into our ayat of the Quran. The first one we're going to start off is the word Taghut. Taghut. In the Quran, the word Taghut actually stands for anyone who's rebellious. Rebelling against the order of God, that person is a Taghut. When Ayatollah Khamenei is explaining this, he says that our nafs can be our Taghut. We all have a nafs, we have an ego, right? God says one thing, I'm not doing that, maybe my nafs, because in the hadith it says that our worst enemy is our nafs. So sometimes maybe our nafs. But he doesn't stop there. He says sometimes it can be our children. Person who's trying to get us or pushing us so that we're not obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes it's our, or our spouse. Sometimes that's the person who's the Taghut, because it's a general terminology, or somebody who's rebelling, right? Or even our close friends. Maybe that's the person who's the Taghut, right? Now, in the Quran, when we look carefully in the Quran, we see this word is used 8 times in the Quran. The word Taghut is used 8 times in the Quran. At least 7 of those times, though, God uses it, and it's referring to the leader of the Jahil society. That leadership, the person who's at the top of the pyramid. It's mentioned vis-a-vis Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm going to mention a couple of the verses, right? And then we look, okay, well, how does this apply? Where does this apply to nowadays? So a very important social position, leading the charge against the Anbiya, right? I'm going to mention two of the times that it's mentioned in the Quran. So brothers and sisters, if you look at your Qurans, Surah number 4, so Surah Nisa, and verse number 76. Surah Nisa, verse number 76. We'll start off with this first verse. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. الذين آمنوا يقاتلون في سبيل الله. Those who believe fight in the way of Allah. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ الطَّاغُوتِ. Those who disbelieve fight in the way of the Taghut. So you can clearly see the Taghut is now standing against God, leading the rebellion. Right? Another one, a very well-known verse, this time it's Surah Baqarah. So verse number 2, Surah number 2, verse number 53, again the same word Taghut is being used. What does God say over there? Allah waliyul ladina amanu. God is the guardian, the protector, the wali of those who believe. يُخْرِجُهُمْ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. God brings the believers from darknesses into light. وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, the non-believers, those who do not believe. أَوْلِيَاؤُهُمُ الطَّاغُوتِ. Their leaders, their guardians are the Taghut. يُخْرِجُونَهُمْ مِنَ النُّورِ إِلَى الظُّلُمَاتِ. They take them from the nur, from the light, and they bring them to darkness. So what we're going to learn with these four groups, and a lesson that, again, for you guys when you're sharing this with other people, is these four groups that we're going to cover in the Quran. It wasn't one specific prophet. Right? You're teaching young children, getting them ready for the struggle, the resistance. It wasn't that there was one particular prophet, they had a problem with that prophet. It wasn't something, only Ibrahim, only Muhammad. No, every prophet, always opposed. And if we're following the path of the prophets, the path of the Anbiya, then we should expect some of this altogether. These individuals, we're going to mention another verse about the individuals and what they would do. Another historical example also. They would have beautiful slogans, wonderful words, things that they would use to go over and rally the masses around. It wasn't like these tyrants would come over and just say, well, let's be evil. You know, we're just all bad. Let's be evil. No, the words they would use, I'm going to give you a quote from Pharaoh. The words that they would use. And then, again, we'll apply this to modern times, nowadays. What do they say nowadays in order to rally the troops, in order to get people to fight against the ways of the prophets? So, but now it's important for us, now we're going to look at the verses. This one is important for us to be looking at the verses together. We'll look at the Arabic, we'll look at the translation, we'll see what it is that God is teaching us. So this one, brothers and sisters, is Surah 6 and verse number 112. So, brothers, let me know if you find the verse. Sisters, let me know if you find the verse. You found it? Okay. Brothers, anybody found it? Okay, wonderful. All right. So let's look at the Arabic of this one. It's interesting. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَا لِكُلِّ نَبِيٍّ عَدُوًّا شَيَاطِينَ الْإِنسِ وَالْجِنِّ. Thus we have made for every prophet, God speaking, for every prophet, an enemy, aduwan. Shayateen. We learned about shayateen before. We said that shayateen are not just limited to Iblis. Right? No, they're shayateen. The verse says, shayateen al-insi wal-jinn. Human beings, mankind, also the jinn. The thing is with shaitan, he's the first guy who started all of this. So all of the sins of all of the other shayateen, up until the day of judgment, he gets the thawab of it. It's all written for him. He started this, right? Even though some of these modern shayateen could teach shaitan a thing or two. These guys are so wicked. Right? Human beings, remember we learned from our hadith, human beings can be worse than the animals. We're the greatest of Allah's creation. We can also be the worst of God's creation. Anyhow, so every prophet had an enemy. Shayateen, jinn and ins. What would they do? يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا. They would inspire each other. يوحي. Why? They would inspire each other with flowery discourse in order to deceive. They would come up with the slogans. How Shaitan, he gives inspiration to people, the words they come up with, the slogans, the titles, presidential campaigns. I'll give you an example from ancient history, but you guys can find many examples from current history. Pharaoh, I'm going to give you an example from Pharaoh. We'll just jump a little bit, I'm going to come back to this same verse. So, if Pharaoh, so he's obviously bad, right? And no monster, ana rabbukumul a'la. What did Pharaoh say when he went to fight against Musa? Surah 40, verse number 26. وَقَالَ فِرْعَوْنَ, monster speaking. ذَرُونِي أَقْتُلْ Musa. Leave me, let me kill Musa. Well, why kill Musa? He says, وَلْيَدْعُ رَبَّهُ. Right? That he can call on his Lord. Let me go over and kill. Musa's a savior. Musa's Mahdi of the time. Right? He's leading the charge. Liberate the people. But what are the words though? We said that the shayateen, they use flowery discourse, wonderful words. What's the words of Fir'aun? He says, إِنِّي أَخَافُ أَن يُبَدِّلَ دِينَكُمْ. I am afraid for your religion. Maybe it's going to change your deen. The way of our forefathers is our moral code. What else? أَوْ أَن يُظْهِرَ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْفَسَادِ. We're going to cause corruption in the land. You don't want corruption? National security? This guy's a threat. So, back to the verse. God's teaching us what to expect. So they have these different words. God says something that's very important. In order to deceive, we learn that. What else? God says this. وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ مَا فَعَلُوا. If your Lord had willed, they would not have done this. There's also a very important point for us to keep in mind. This gives us encouragement despite the numbers of the enemy. Despite their propaganda machine. Right? What God teaches us over, he says that if your Lord had wanted it, they wouldn't be able to do this. Right? If God wanted, he could turn them all into dust. Right? He could rain down stones from the heaven. Right? God is all powerful. But it's not the sunnah of Allah to make it super easy for the believers. Be no bumps in the road, no challenges, no enemies. Believers just get up and just walk right into paradise. That's not the way that he could. But he doesn't rain down firebolts, thunderbolts from the heavens on his enemies. No, the believers have to go through certain tests. God mentions that, right? And he also gives us encouragement. What does he say? He says, فَذَرْهُمْ وَمَا يَفْتَرُونَ. He says, leave them in those lies that they fabricate. They're coming up with these popular slogans. People are rallying around them. God could stop it. He doesn't. The tests are supposed to take place, right? That part, they tell us, is so that we don't get frustrated and worried. We lose the way. Why is it they're being effective? They're able to stop other people from the way, right? We start losing the way. No, God's in control. The test is supposed to take place. God mentions the test that's supposed to take place in the next verse, right? So still Surah 6, verse number 113. Why does God let them do that? Come up with these wonderful slogans. They're leading money, right? 4 groups. You have nothing. In the next verse, لِتَصْغَى إِلَيْهِ أَفْئِدَةُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ. God says, he says, so that the hearts of those who do not believe in the hereafter may incline towards it. God wants them, those who don't believe in the hereafter, they're faucet, they have a problem. God wants them to see who's believers and who aren't. Who really has iman, who doesn't. This test has to happen. He's not forcing the pharaohs or these other groups to do these things, but the test is supposed to happen. The natural inclination is there. When they come up with the slogans, the people can feel good about themselves. Huh? Those slogans, who wouldn't? We're stopping national security. We're stopping corruption in the land. Musa is, right? What happens is, if you look at the verse though, it says that those who don't believe in the hereafter, they will be inclined. For those who believe in the hereafter, don't worry about it too much. They're not going to be so subject to these or fall so easily for the propaganda machine. For believers, they'll be able to see through these things. But those who want to do wrong and just need an excuse, and they have internal diseases in the heart, and God also mentions that. He says, وَلِيَرْضَوْهُ, they be content, be pleased. Yes, that's why we're going to war with these people. Right? وَلِيَقْتَرِفُوا مَا هُمْ مُقْتَرِفُونَ. But they commit those acts they're supposed to commit. Right? And again, we know that we don't believe in compulsion. We know that. Right? But certain tests are supposed to take place. The grounds are there. Those people who have that internal wickedness, that sickness in the heart, who don't want to fix themselves, now they have the excuse. They go over and do this. Now, next test. Again, this verse is going to help us with those first three groups. Right? We said the leadership, the head of the pyramid. The political cronies and advisors and strategians, and those are getting the kickbacks, those guys, and also those businessmen. I don't want to falsely accuse any of these super wealthy families that are out there, Rockefellers or Goldman Sachs, any of these guys. I'm not. People who are fabulously so wealthy, believe me, they've ran presidential campaigns. And the president would go in the supermarket. This actually happened. It's recorded. And they were watching him at the cash register, and he was like, "Oh, we've invented these ones." He hadn't been in a store. These guys, unbelievably wealthy. Anyhow, the Quran talks about this. Musa. We start off with Musa. So Surah 40 and verse number 23. Again, we're learning patterns. What to expect. Surah 40, verse number 23. God says this. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا وَسُلْطَانٍ مُبِينٍ. Definitely, or indeed, we sent Musa with our signs, ayatina, and a manifest authority. So Musa comes in with intellectual arguments, wonderful akhlaq, Musa. Anybody can see the character of Musa. Then he comes over, remember those signs. He has the hand that shines like the sun. He has the staff. Right? Anybody should see those signs, and automatically you should know. Intellectual arguments prove he's the messenger of God. What happened? And more importantly, who was the opposition? Who did God send him to go against? What does God say in the next verse? 24. Ila Fir'aun, the political leader. Haman, the inner circle. Well, Qarun is a businessman. He's not a political leader. What did they say? Did they just say, "Oh, wonderful, that was your message, alhamdulillah, we're just looking for the truth"? What did they say? How did they respond? فَقَالُوا سَاحِرٌ كَذَّابٌ. They said, he's a lying magician. What else? It says, فَلَمَّا جَاءَهُمْ بِالْحَقِّ. When Musa came to them with the truth, and again, this is just the way that it works in history. When he came to them with the truth, بِالْحَقِّ مِنْ عِنْدِنَا, truth from us. They know what they're dealing with. This is a prophet of God. What did they say? قَالُوا اُقْتُلُوا أَبْنَاءَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. Kill off the sons of those who believe. Far from submitting to the truth and saying it's all true and let's submit. No. Kill off all the boys. Kill off the young men. Keep them from being threats. وَاسْتَحْيُوا نِسَاءَهُمْ. Keep the women alive. Spare the women. Kill off the men. And then of course God tells us وَمَا كَيْدُ الْكَافِرِينَ إِلَّا فِي ضَلَالٍ. That the scheming of the disbelievers is naught but astray. Right, so for you and I, again, we don't have to worry about the plots of the enemy. What we're doing, we're saying God is on our side. We're doing our responsibilities. God will make it happen. Inshallah, Allah gives us life. And we see what are the characteristics that the followers of the Anbiya are supposed to have in order for the Anbiya to have that outward victory. So we know what we're supposed to have for Imam Mahdi. Right? That's something we're going to learn, inshallah, from the verses. But right now, what we're learning from this verse is that their plans are straight. You don't have to worry that they're doing this, Islam will be wiped out. No. So there's another verse now that again addresses, because again, these are Quranic themes. Things are repeated. We're studying the Quran subject-wise, giving that big picture of Islam. There's another verse that talks about, it's not the only verse, another verse that again talks about that group, the fabulously wealthy, living off, right, at the expense of other people. At the expense of other people. When you have, let's say you go to Guatemala, right, and you take over, you're growing bananas over there. Was one guy, it's not that he gives the rights to all the peasants. There's one guy eating the rights of other people. That's how he's able to get wealthy. So the Quran talks about these individuals. Now this is Surah 34, verse number 34. So Surah 34, verse number 34, and verse number 35. Again, the Quran. This is what God says. So it's a group like Qarun. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا فِي قَرْيَةٍ مِّن نَذِيرٍ إِلَّا قَالَ مُتْرَفُوهَا. It says, we send no warner, no prophet, no warner unto a town, إِلَّا قَالَ مُتْرَفُوهَا, except that those who are living in luxury, they say, قَالَ مُتْرَفُوهَا إِنَّا بِمَا أُرْسِلْتُمْ بِهِ كَافِرُونَ, that we disbelieve in that with which you were sent. The first line of people who are opposed, who know that, okay, this prophet is going to come in, he's going to liberate everybody. The first line of defense are those people who are in power. They continue in the next verse. It says, وَقَالُوا, and they said, نَحْنُ أَكْثَرُ أَمْوَالًا وَأَوْلَادًا. We have much more wealth. We have much more children. وَمَا نَحْنُ بِمُعَذَّبِينَ. We're not going to be punished. That's their line of defense and their logic. Now, the other one, the last verse, again, this is not the only verse, is about those religious leaders. Those corrupt religious leaders who weren't sincerely serving God, right? The high priests, the rabbis, right? Mega churches sometimes. What does God say in the Quran? This is Surah 9, and it's verse number 34. So, again, we said there's terminology we're going to look for in the Quran, words we're going to find in the Quran that tell us about these different groups. Anyhow, this one, Surah 9, verse number 34, God says this. He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا, O you who believe, إن كثيرا من الأحبار والرهبان ليأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل. O you who believe, indeed many of the rabbis and the monks consume the wealth of the people falsely. Give to God, give to the church, religious tithes, right? Serve the gods, right? Sacrifice to the people over there trying to worship. يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ النَّاسِ بِالْبَاطِلِ. What else? وَيَصُدُّونَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And they bar from the way of Allah. They're blocking people from the way of Allah. This verse also talks about, again, those extremely wealthy individuals. Let's listen to the rest of the verse. وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ. Those people who hoard gold and silver. وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَهَا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And they don't spend it in the way of Allah. There's people who, there's ways, even without deen, people know, there's ways of eradicating poverty, of taking care of the majority of mankind. People could live a decent life. They hoard though. لا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم. Give them the good tidings, right? Bishara. Right? Give them good tidings of a painful punishment. So brothers and sisters, these were the four groups that were there opposing the prophets. Those primary, then they would get the masses, right? They would stir up the masses after they came out and they showed their opposition. Then they would stir up the masses. So those are the groups that we have to prepare ourselves as followers of the Anbiya, that the opposition that will come our way will come in that form. Well, we'll end now. First we'll send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.